What's up, Rivalers? Today we're going to be showing you everything that Captain America's shield can and can't reflect, and the results might actually surprise you because this ability has some really interesting properties. And it is important to know exactly how this reflect ability works because knowing what it does and doesn't reflect can make the difference between your entire team getting wiped. So first, let's cover how the ability works. Captain America's shield is his right click, where he holds up a shield for 400 HP that blocks all incoming damage in this area. And if it's a projectile, it's actually reflected back at the enemy, turning it into your projectile, and you can kind of aim it, but the direction it flies is randomized. The shield can be broken, which puts the ability on cooldown, and harder hitting projectiles do more damage to the shield. But as long as your shield has 1 HP, it will block the full damage of an ability, even if it's a fully charged ultimate. So what all can Captain America block with this shield? Well, almost everything. Whether it's ranged or a melee attack, Cap can completely absorb the damage without taking a lick of damage to his health bar if it hits the shield. So let's start small and work our way up. The rule is that if it's a melee attack, it gets blocked and absorbed. If it's a projectile, it will get blocked and reflected. So as you can see here, Iron Fist, Wolverine, Spider-Man, and Magic are all melee characters, and all of their primary fires just get blocked. And Iron Man, Black Widow, Moon Knight, and Psylocke are all ranged characters, and their primary fire gets reflected. It gets a little more interesting when you throw in abilities with unique properties into the mix. For instance, if you reflect an enemy healing projectile such as Rocket's healing orbs and Jeff's bubble, these all become your team's healing abilities if you reflect them with Cap. And you can even reflect abilities with crowd control. If you reflect Scarlet Witch's stun, Dark Seal, it now becomes your stun. The same applies to Hela's stun, Squirrel Girl's root, Mantis' sleep, and Luna Snow's freeze. If you reflect it into an enemy, you can CC that enemy. Now let's get a little juicier and talk about ultimates. So as we mentioned before, as long as you have 1 HP left on your shield, you can block an entire ultimate's damage, even if it's something that should instantly burst you like Scarlet Witch's ult. But what about reflecting ults back at enemies? Well, as long as the game has coded that ultimate as a projectile, you absolutely can reflect them back. So Cap can reflect back Magneto's ultimate, Iron Man's ultimate, and Hela's ultimate. And if the enemy ultimate is a hit scan like Star-Lord or Punisher, you can reflect that back too, but it's really hard to aim and reflect the damage back in any meaningful way because each shot will be reflected individually. And once again, if the ultimate is a projectile and has crowd control attached to it and you reflect it, it will also reflect the crowd control. And you can also reflect Black Widow's ultimate back at her, and it applies the slow to her instead. Ultimates that are not coded as projectiles can be blocked entirely but not reflected back. So for instance, here's me blocking the entirety of Doctor Strange's ult. Cap won't get stunned by it, but he also doesn't reflect the stun back on the Strange, since it's not a projectile. Now there are certain ults with special properties that don't work the way you think they would. For instance, blocking Namor ult can be tricky, because if you aim up at the whale or at Namor, you will take full damage and still get knocked down. However, I've discovered that if you aim your shield down at the ground as the whale lands on you, you can block both the damage and the knockdown. And this works the same with Bucky's ult. You don't actually want to aim your shield at Bucky, but down at the ground, which will block the damage and keep you from getting marked for reset. If you aim at the blast zone, you can even block the entirety of Iron Man's ultimate from hitting your teammates. Aiming at the ground also completely blocks Venom's ult as well. Another really interesting fact about Cap's shield is that it also prevents some enemies from locking onto him. So abilities like Dagger's primary fire normally locks onto enemies like a homing missile, but if Cap's shield is up, she can't target him to lock onto him, which means her primary fire just whizzes past him if it's not fired directly at him. This also applies to Iron Fist, who normally has this yellow reticle allowing him to lock onto enemies, and his primary fire dashes to enemies he's locked onto. Well, if Cap's shield is up, it actually prevents him from locking on, which means he can't dash to you and just looks really silly floating and kicking the air. However, his shield only prevents some enemies from locking on. Star-Lord's ultimate and Scarlet Witch's primary fire still lock on despite dealing no damage through the shield. Cap also can't get targeted by Monster Hulk's point-and-click slam ability, he just can't target Cap when his shield is up. The same applies to Storm's ability Goddess Boost, which normally periodically strikes enemies in this circle with lightning, but it straight up won't strike Cap as long as his shield is up. It just doesn't even try to damage him since it can't lock onto him. If you have your shield up facing Storm's ultimate, you can actually block the entire tornado as well. Cap's shield seems pretty invincible so far, so let's see what Cap can't block or reflect at all. Cap still gets CC'd by Wolverine's ult even if his shield is up. Captain America's shield can't block or reflect Jeff's ult at all and still gets swallowed by him. No matter where you aim your shield, you cannot block Moon Knight's ult. Psylocke's ult can't be blocked or reflected no matter what direction you're facing. Cloak and Dagger's ultimate can't be blocked or reflected. And of course, any ability or ultimate that is considered equipment can't be blocked or reflected, such as Rocket's beacons. There are also some interactions with Cap's shield that are just downright bizarre, such as Hawkeye's ultimate, where Captain America still spawns after images as usual, though as soon as he pulls his shield up while looking at you, they disappear. And even if his shield is up, if he's not looking at you, it's still going to spawn the after images. So it's almost like Cap's shield blocks the ability to spawn Hawkeye's after images. Now, Squirrel Girl's ultimate is interesting because if your shield is up, the squirrels actually climb over Cap's head, which is hilarious. You can't reflect it, but as long as you keep the shield facing the squirrel stampede, it won't damage you. This is one of my favorite ultimate interactions. So that about concludes our deep dive into how Captain America's shield works and what it can and can't reflect. I honestly think Cap's shield is one of the coolest abilities in the game, and it leads to some really amazing moments, like this one from my first time ever playing the character. Now, I rigorously tested every single ability in the game versus Cap's shield for your viewing pleasure. So if you have any questions about how it works versus certain abilities that wasn't shown in this video, feel free to leave a comment down below. But in the meantime, here's a handy cheat sheet on how every character's ultimate works versus the shield. Be sure to be subscribed for more informative Marvel Rivals content just like this, and I will see you in the next one, Rivalers.